Hi esteemed logicians. Welcome to the Logical Christ channel. In this video, we will examine the Islamic doctrine of Tawhid. We will logically examine the Islamic doctrine of the absolute oneness of God, which is the foundational and most central concept in Islam. Sit back and relax. We will be back after this short intro. The thesis. Muslims claim that Tawhid is the most accurate description of God. We will now examine how the absolute oneness of God, as portrayed by Islam, is inconsistent with the presentation of the Quran about God. The assertion. Tawhid is the Islamic doctrine of the absolute oneness of God, which asserts that God is one, unique, indivisible, and has no partners, equals, or offspring. The argumentation. Here are some common points of discussion regarding the inconsistency of Tawhid as portrayed by the Quran. But first, let's be clear that Tawhid is not merely monotheism, as most Muslims claim. Here's Dr. Zakir Naik discussing what Tawhid is.
Islam does not merely believe in monotheism. Islam believes in Tawhid. Tawhid means unification. It means asserting oneness. It comes from the root word wahada, means to unite, to unify. It means to consolidate. Islam does not merely believe in believing in one God. It believes in Tawhid.
But here's Dr. William Lane Craig on how the Islamic concept of Tawhid is confusing.
Is the Islamic concept of God and the doctrine of Tawhid, or the oneness or unicity of God. And this is a doctrine which is very confusing and very controversial among Islamic theologians. There are a number of different versions of Tawhid on which there is no consensus.
Point 1. God is unique. Quran 1:12-4 says, "And there is none comparable to him." This shows that God is unique and not the same as creation. But Muslims claim that God is just one individuality, like a human being is one individual, which is directly contrary to this Quranic verse by comparing God to creation. Point 2. God is plural. The Quran frequently uses the pronoun we when referring to God. An example of this is Quran 15:9, which states, "Indeed, it is we who sent down the Quran, and indeed, we will be its guardian." Muslims evade this plurality of God by arguing that this is just the plural of majesty, drawing a similarity to how a monarch might say we decree, rather than I decree. But this is just a lame excuse because other Quranic verses use the singular pronoun, like Quran 1:12-4. Point 3. Plurality is majestic. As pointed out previously, the use of plurality is more magnificent than singularity. That's why God would be more majestic if God had plural individualities in himself than being singular. Muslims will not concede that God is a multi-personal divine being, which is consistent with the concept of the plural of majesty. God being a plurality of individuals is more fitting for the concept of absolute oneness of God that extols the idea of perfect unity. Point 4. The eternality of God's attributes. If God is absolutely one and existed alone before creation, this defies the rationality of God. Muslims extol that God is eternally loving, the merciful, the speaker, and the all-forgiving. So how can God be loving? Doesn't he need someone to love? For him to be merciful, doesn't he need someone to show mercy to? Positing God as one individuality will lead to the argument that God's attributes become contingent on creation, making God himself seem less self-sufficient in the eternity past, making God inadequate before creation. The conclusion. Tawhid, the Islamic doctrine of the absolute oneness of God, which is the foundational and most central concept in Islam, appears to be taught by Muslim scholars in a way that is contrary to the depiction of God given by the Quran. Islamic scholars have to do mental gymnastics to make the Quran align with their definitions of Tawhid. We adequately show that the Tawhid taught by the Quran is more consistent with God being multi-personal. The unity of plurality is the perfect fit for the absolute oneness of God. Here is Sam Shamoun showing how Muslims can't defend their concept of Tawhid.
Is the Quran Allah?
Of course not.
Say it again, I want them to hear, because I'm going to show that you don't believe in Tawhid. Is the Quran Allah?
The Quran is an attribute of Allah.
So you didn't answer the question again. Is the Quran Allah?
The Quran is not Allah, no.
Okay, and it's uncreated?
The Quran is uncreated.
So the Quran is not Allah, but the Quran is uncreated, right?
That's right.
Okay, count, do math. I know you know math, you went to kindergarten. Allah is uncreated, the Quran is uncreated, the Quran is not Allah, that's 2. Is the Quran uncreated? Is it the uncreated speech of Allah or no?
Allah spoke the words of the Quran.
But that didn't answer my question. Is the Quran uncreated? Is it the kalam, speech of Allah? And as a speech of Allah, it's uncreated. It's one of His attributes, the Sifat.
Yeah, it's uncreated.
Okay, so the Quran is uncreated, it has no beginning. Good. Now, the Quran is not Allah, is it?
The Quran is the speech of Allah.
But it's not Allah, so when you touch the Quran, you're not touching Allah, right?
No.
Okay, so the Quran is uncreated, Allah is uncreated. Now, how many uncreated things you believe in? Who alone is uncreated?
Allah.
So wait, again, who alone is uncreated?
Allah.
Okay, good. So you just made the Quran Allah because you said only Allah is uncreated, but now you said the Quran is uncreated.
This doesn't make sense. That's the speech of Allah.
But wait, didn't you just say, Jihad? We heard you say the Quran is uncreated, it's not
You're
Allah.
just trying to play these little word games, man. This is not
Okay.
a basis for a fruitful discussion. Okay.
Okay, so let's
The
talk about.
speech of Allah is uncreated.
Yes.
That's His speech. It's not like you touch the book. This is no.
But you said the Quran is not Allah, though.
It's His speech.
But it's not Allah, right? Is it Allah?
It's His speech.
Yeah, so that means the tap dance. You're not going to answer. That's okay. Okay, now, can the Quran be the Quran if it's not a book?
It was compiled into a book.
Okay, so is part of the Quran, one essential part of the Quran is that it's a book, a kitab?
Yes, it was compiled into a book.
Okay, so good. Because in Surah Al-Ma'idah 548, it says, we sent down to you the book, kitab. So the Quran is a book, right?
The book.
Good. Okay, so that book, that Quran, that book part of it, because it says we sent down to you the book, kitab, that book part of it. That's created, isn't it?
The Quran is the uncreated speech of Allah.
I'm talking about the book, because the Quran is also a kitab. It's a book. I gave you the ayah. Surah Al-Ma'idah.
The words themselves are uncreated, but the form of a book,
so the book is created.
them.
Okay, so the book is created. It came into existence. It's
Not
physical.
the words.
Yeah, I know that. The book, where the Arabic.
Constellation was created.
So the book is created. It's part of creation. And yet the Quran is a book, which means the Quran cannot be truly the Quran if it's not a kitab, it's not a book, because that's what it says. We sent down to you the book. So how many natures does the Quran have?
Listen to me. Don't come to these kind of topics. They don't help your case at all. Okay, I just answered your question.
Whether you like it or not, you're either Sunni or you're Quran only or you're Shia. Are you Shia?
I'm Sunni.
Okay. You know Sunni Islam. You know this, so there's no debate on this. You can ask your Imam. Sunni Islam, you believe that the Quran is Kalam Allah.
Yes.
Okay. And you know because it's Kalam, by the way, let me explain it in English for the Americans here. Kalam Allah means the Quran is the speech of Allah. Kalam Allah, word, speech of Allah. For those who don't know what Islam teaches.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just explaining it to the other people. I know you know this. Okay. Now, as the Kalam Allah, you know, Sunni Islam says the Quran is uncreated.
Yes.
You agree it's uncreated, right?
Yes.
I really like you because you're a very honest, humble man. I mean that. And I enjoy talking to Muslims like you, not those who come and mock and insult and get me angry. Okay. So if it's uncreated, the Quran, is it Allah?
No.
Okay, so let's
It is word.
okay, let's walk with me. Quran is uncreated because it's the word of Allah, but it's not Allah. So the Quran is uncreated because it's the word of Allah, and yet it's not Allah. So Allah is uncreated, right?
It's His word.
Yeah, but I'm talking about Allah. Allah is uncreated, right?
Yes.
Okay, and the Quran is uncreated. That's two.
But that's His word. That's why.
So the Quran, it's part of Allah. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't really know because the Quran says it was in a preserved tablet. I don't really know if
Yeah,
it
but
had
the
a
tablet
beginning.
could not exist forever unless you believe there's a tablet that's uncreated. That's not Allah. Then you got problems.
Well, only God can have that type of knowledge. You
Okay.
know? I don't have that knowledge.
So, but if you agree the Quran is uncreated and it's His word, so it's connected to Allah, right?
Yes.
So when the Quran became a book, because it's connected to Allah, did part of Allah become a book?
I think that's a silly argument, you know.
No, it isn't, because the Quran is a kitab. That's part of its nature. That's why in the Quran it says, we sent down to you the kitab and truth. That's the Quran, right?
Yeah, but do you have any Quran or hadith that says the Quran is eternal?
Well, I mean, I have hadith where it says it's the word of Allah, and then you have the Sahaba saying because it's the word of Allah, it's uncreated. That's why the Sunni Islam concluded that the Quran is uncreated. But even the Quran itself doesn't say it's the word of Allah. If you go to the Quran, and if I show you where the Quran says the Quran is the word of Allah, it's not in the Quran, that's in the hadith.
Yeah, but
Right?
doesn't the Quran say that this is a word from Allah? God?
No, nowhere does the Quran identify itself as the word of Allah. It doesn't say this Quran is the word of Allah. It's not in the Quran.
What about the revelation from Allah?
Yeah, I mean, the Gospel is called the Revelation, the Torah is called the Revelation, the Zabur, but you're asking me for the expression word of Allah. That does not come from the Quran, that comes from the hadith.
Well, I thought the Quran says it was eternal. That's why
The Quran doesn't even identify itself as the word of Allah, let alone as eternal. This comes from the hadith, where when your prophet called the Quran the word of Allah, and then the Muslims, the companions of Muhammad and their followers said, well, if it's the word of Allah, it's separate from creation. And they used an ayah to prove it. You know what ayah? Go to chapter 7 of the Quran, verse 54.
Indeed, your Lord Allah, who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, then He established Himself above the throne. He covers the night and the day, changing it rapidly. Then He created the sun and the moon and the stars, subjected by His command. Unquestionably, His is the creation and the command.
Okay, right there. The Muslims said there's a distinction between creation and commandment. The command of Allah is different from His creation. Okay, so they go, the command, that's what the Quran is. So because it's the command of Allah, and the command of Allah is different from His creation, that means the Quran is not created. This is their logic. But if you read it here, the commandment is not said to be the Quran, right? Does it say, verily, His is the creation and the Quran? No, it says His is the creation and the commandment, the Amr, right?
Yes.
But they reason, okay, if the command of Allah is separate from creation, and the Quran is the command of Allah, then the Quran is separate from creation. But there's nothing in the Quran where the Quran says, this is the word of Allah, this is the command of Allah, meaning the Quran. The Quran is the word of Allah.
I always hear Muslims say the Quran is uncreated, therefore I thought that it was in the Quran. But I never knew that it was only in the Sahaba.
But you can't be Sunni if you reject the hadith and all that. So if that's up to you. You don't want to be Sunni, that's fine. No one says you have to be Sunni.
I accept hadith.
Okay. Well, in the hadiths, Muhammad called it the word of Allah, and his companions reason if it's the word of Allah, then it can't be created. So that's the hadith. So you go with the hadith, you're stuck. Quran is uncreated. So if it's uncreated, good.
But the Torah and the Injil is also Allah's word, but that's not considered.
Yeah, but we don't believe it. Yeah, that's your problem as a Muslim, not our problem. As Christians, we believe the books of the Bible, the revelations that are written, are not eternal. Why? Because God used men that He inspired by the Holy Spirit to write down what God wanted to be written down in human language. Because it's in human language, it's not eternal because human language is created, but still using human words, they were giving us the words of God in human language, because God has to speak on our level in our language because we can't understand God. So no Christian believes the Bible is uncreated. We believe Jesus is the eternal word that became flesh. He's uncreated, not the Bible. But the Muslims said that about the Quran.
Yeah, I get it.
So you got it. Good, thank you. But so what we say about Jesus, the Sunni Muslims say about the Quran. So you guys got it confused. You're saying the eternal word became a book. We say no, the eternal word became man. Jesus is the eternal word, not the Quran. So you're okay with the word becoming a book, but you're not okay with the word becoming a man. Why?
I hope you learned from this video. Comment down below for your rebuttal. Until next time.
Thinking with Logical Christ.